and welcome to Captain's Dry Dock. In this episode, I'll be reviewing and showing how to use Scalectronics self-described,
easy to use, customizable LED light and sound effects solution designed for scale models.
or in short, Inner Light. Let's see if that's a reality. Before I get into what this little black box does, I want to tell you why I gave it a try and if it's worth the money. Years ago, I started this channel with videos of my Building Enterprise D kit by round 2 with the aim to install custom lights and sound effects. At that time, other than the overly priced lighting kits that were designed for specific models, there weren't many off-the-shelf options for light and sound effects that were also customizable. So I developed one using an Arduino, which is a programmable microcontroller. But as much as I tried to learn, the more it appeared like the Matrix to me and I started to dribble. So I hired the services of a coder from a freelancer website. Although I achieved what I wanted, it was stressful and not an enjoyable experience and took a lot of time to develop and plenty of mistakes, and it ended up being overly complicated. Also, if I wanted to change anything later, I would have to pay a coder again to tweak it, or attempt it myself and risk screwing up everything. This setup may be familiar to many, as each LED and light strip has its own set of wires leading out to the controller, of which resembled my model looking like it had a bad case of worms. And was a nightmare to fit everything inside without shorting or breaking a connection, as well as my will to live. However, before I could finish it, life interrupted with a house move, new wife and 2 kids. So by the time I got back to it, new model making techniques were developed, better third-party accurate parts turned up, technology and a battered model from the house move meant I wanted to start from scratch. But I would only do so if I could redo all the electronics with an off-the-shelf system that was customizable and, most importantly, simple. Now, I saw this product a few years ago by Scalectronics and thought this was too good to be true, as I couldn't find any reviews at the time or see anyone from any model making forums that I was on using it.
Dear God, it's beautiful.
But it wasn't until my friend Wayne Minnie from Motion Picture Effects recommended it to me. After all, I'm not going to argue with the foremost expert in next generation era model making. So after an email exchange with the man behind Scalectronics, whose name is overshadowed by his genius, Andy, I took the plunge and bought the Pro Controller Starter Kit from the website. Link is in the descriptions below. This came to me special delivery and inside was a loose assembly of bagged items. Although the instructions are on the webpage, for those traditionalists that usually are the ones that are clinging on to the use of cash rather than chip and pin, Scalectronics has you covered with an A4 colour home inkjet printout included with step-by-step instructions of setup. Next was a selection of RGBW LED light strips with 3-pin connectors already soldered on. A bag of single RGBW LEDs also with connectors. By the way, if you're like me and you didn't have a clue what RGBW is, it means that these can light up as red, green, blue and most importantly for my model, white. Device power connector and a relevant type of plug for your region, which for me is the glorious UK 3-pin safety plug. Fibre optics with connectors that can snap directly onto the LEDs in the light strip, pre-soldered 3-pin connecting wires, and the brains of the system, a Wi-Fi enabled Raspberry Pi, fully encased and pre-programmed. Now, as a starter kit, it was great that I could just plug everything together like Lego and not have to solder. So I can instead spend my time learning my way around the system. And then I just had to carefully follow the detailed setup instructions. At first it was quite daunting as I didn't understand how it all connects, seeing that the controller has so many pins, as I was assuming that each LED strip or LED connects to its own pin. But then after much hand-holding by Andy over email, I learned that the inner light system is basically a single long string of programmable LEDs, and to be fair, which is actually described in the website's Q&A that of course I didn't read, where you separate it in whatever section lengths you require, so you place light where it's needed in a model and you can include the individual LEDs. which means only 3 wires connect to the controller and go into the model. Game changer.
I love it! Come on!
Connecting everything is actually quite straightforward when you know how. First, you start off with the controller. And just to note, there's actually a little protective C-shaped cap surrounding one of the pins. Now, there was no picture reference of this on the website, so I emailed Andy and he assured me that it's there so you don't accidentally touch the other connectors and short everything out. Nice touch. The main power cable has a selection of wires. The thick one has a micro USB connector, which is the power. A single black LED data lead that goes into pin 19, that's the one that's surrounded by the little protector, and the 3-pin connector, that is the beginning of your lighty pew pew things you want to add. In this case, you can plug in any type of LEDs, such as a strip or single LEDs, so long they're 5V, RGB or RGBW. You can source the additional LEDs yourself if you want to cut costs, but if you're like me and you don't want to faff around with soldering straight away, you can buy these directly from the website already soldered with 3-pin connectors. I totally forgot to mention, but it's super important that if you're soldering up your own LEDs, make bloody sure that they follow the direction of the arrows printed on them that go away from the controller, or they'll either not work, blow up, or both. And I accidentally made that mistake once. If you want to add sound effects, then you have to buy a speaker and amp, which doesn't come with the starter pack. This can be bought directly from Scalectronics as an easy to use plug and play item. Or you can source your own amp and speakers. Personally, I feel that buying directly from Scalectronics is the best option as it plugs directly into the system out the box. First, a jack plug lead is inserted into the controller. This is where the sound signals come from, a bit like headphones in a Walkman. Yes, I said Walkman, I'm that old. The speaker amp unit itself plugs in line with the LEDs and has 2 3-pin connectors that go into and out of the unit before carrying onto those LEDs you plug in on the other side. And the speaker is easily connected at the green screw terminals with the negative and positive wires. And that's it, it's ready to be customized and do its thing, as this unit is controlled by connecting to the controller's Wi-Fi via an app, tablet, device or computer, which I'll get into later. I wanted to include physical buttons as well, mainly because technology sometimes fails, especially as I'm using an Android device. Sorry Android lovers, but you know it's true. Or, more than likely, my daughter may have nicked my tablet to watch Cocomelon. Love! If you want to control it with physical buttons, you'll need to buy a selection of jumper wires and of course buttons, but I also recommend a breadboard. So to make this diagram clearer, I'm now just going to show you the button setup, and we have to pretend that everything you've seen so far is still hooked up. This is where the breadboard is really handy, as it allows you to connect everything up temporarily for testing, and you can plug things in rather than just solder so you can see if it all works. Looking at the controller, find the negative pin that's designated for buttons using the labelled instructions. In this case, it's pin 30, and connect it to the negative row on your breadboard. My model has multiple light and sound effects, so I've added 7 that plug into the breadboard. Each one will perform a different action once it's all customized later. One terminal for every button needs to be grounded, so I'll connect it to the negative row. As that row is all connected, and referring closely to the labelled instructions, connect each of those buttons to the pins that are designated for buttons. At this point, it doesn't really matter which order they're in, as they've not been assigned an action yet, but to give you an idea of what my buttons are doing for my model, this is it. White interior lights come on, warp drive does its flashy blue and white burst effect, firing phasers, firing photon torpedoes, and the startup and shutdown switches. Once the circuit is set up, it's time to tell the controller what I want it all to do by logging onto a dashboard via my computer on a browser. Now, I got carried away and pretty much customized everything without filming, but I'll do a sample so you can see how easy it was and the entire process. Make sure the controller is plugged in and getting power, which you can tell by seeing a red LED inside the case light up. First, you start by logging onto the controller's inbuilt Wi-Fi from your computer. This takes a few seconds to appear and shows up as inner light, where you disconnect from your home Wi-Fi and connect your computer to the controller's Wi-Fi instead. Just be aware this means your computer is no longer connected to the internet. So if you want to check anything online, do so beforehand. Once connected, open up the browser and navigate to one of the two addresses stated in the instructions. This will then pop up with a login box that uses a default username and password. This you can change later. Now you're looking at the main tab. At this point, you don't need to touch anything here to make things light up or go pew pew. And like I'll mention a few times throughout this entire walkthrough, it's all pretty self-explanatory. So for me, I did actually have to come back to this to alter the total number of LEDs I was using, as a default I think was 150. So if you have anything more like I do, you just need to increase it here or nothing will happen. The LED grouping tab is where you tell the controller what the individual LEDs are. This is done by giving them a name and describing the number position it sits on along the circuit. As I mentioned, I got carried away and didn't film any of this, and have pretty much assigned all my LEDs to the Enterprise D model. So what I'm going to show you is an example of pretending that I have a string of 10 LEDs that I need to assign. First, I click the LED group button, which adds a group. Then I give the first group a name. This can be anything you want, just so long you know what it represents. So for example, if it's headlights on a car or warp engines on a starship. The next field is like describing what pages in a document you want to print, but in this case, what LEDs you want to light up. So I want the first, second and third LEDs in the string to be my impulse engines. So rather type 1, 2, 3, I instead enter 1-3, so any LEDs between these numbers are included. Once done, you can double check you've assigned the correct LEDs by this good idea of a button. Click on this and those LEDs will flash red a few times, allowing you to know you've assigned the correct LEDs. It's when you start having a few hundred LEDs in your string that this is really useful. Once you're happy, click Save, and a pop-up window will confirm it's now programmed into the controller. If you find later nothing works, it's probably because it wasn't saved and you won't see it when you look back, which I did a few times in my excitement playing around with this system. I'm also going to add some blinky strobe lights. I'm going through the same process. Only this time, as an example, I'm going to assign LEDs at different parts of the 10 LED string, which means only those specific LEDs will light up. Now the LEDs are assigned, they now have to be told what to do via the LED Effects tab. Again, you can see I've done this for my Enterprise D LEDs, but now I'll make some effects for the two groups that we've assigned. Click onto the Add New Effect button, click onto the new effect to expand, and give it a name. Again, this can be anything, just so long you know what it does. But I'm going to be boring and call it the same name as the LED group. Then I have a choice of light and effect from the drop-down menu, and it's all very self-explanatory. And so I want my engines glowing all the time. The next drop-down menu allows you to pick which group you want to see in real time via the test button. Here's where any colour can be assigned to those LEDs, and you're spoilt for choice, either picking a coloured swatch, value, or from a spectrum. The power of this is awesome, so if you have exact values you want to mimic, you can do it here. You can also add more colours to make a sequence. So here I can make my impulse engines glow red, and then add another colour to make them turn dark red, and then add a third colour to turn purple, all of which can be controlled by the timing, where one fades into another. This can range from milliseconds to seconds. For example, 0.5 being half a second and 1 being a full second, and so on. Here is a random option, which is indicated by the yellow dice button, which does exactly that. Basically, this is a sandbox and you just have to play with it as much as you want using the test button to try and get the result you're looking for. And this is so much fun compared to going back and forth coding with an Arduino. But again, remember, making sure that you save before moving on. I'll also add another effect for my strobe nav lights in the same way, but the difference is that I'm going to select flashing and indicate timing of the flash from how long it's going to be on to how long it's going to be off. The Output Effects tab is if you bought the additional board to expand the number of outputs from the controller, so unless you've done something really specific, you don't need to do anything here. The Scenes tab is basically putting it all together, assigning the LED group to the relevant LED effect. You can have multiple groups and effects under one scene, like I have done with my Enterprise D startup. Meaning in this scenario that when the switch is turned on, these things are triggered. So all my LEDs will come on at different times that I've assigned on my model, and it will light up one section at a time the way I planned. So to include LEDs that I've programmed just now, I go back to my startup folder and click the Add LED Effect button. And all I need to do is click the drop down menus and select the LED and effects to pair them up. See, this is where it's really important that you name them something that you'll recognise at this point. You can also test the effect and indicate how many seconds after the on switch is triggered before it all actions. It's also here where you can add sound effects with the group of LEDs as they turn on. All you have to do is click that Add Sound/Video Effect button, click onto the Select Media File button and navigate to the MP3 file. As I don't have an impulse sound effect yet, I'll use the Warp MP3 as an example. This then loads up and I can now control when I want this sound effect to start, 0 being immediately, or add a number to indicate how many seconds later it will actually start playing. You can also program it to play once or on a loop. This effect is good if you want a theme tune playing all the time while the model is on, such as a Back to the Future theme tune to a DeLorean model. And you also have volume control and test buttons, but again, remember to save. The same procedure is repeated to the blinking nav lights, with the only difference of not having a sound effect. As mentioned, you can have multiple scenes, so for example, I want the warp engines to flash when a button is pressed. You make the scene in the same way, but it's only for a particular set of LEDs. This is where you assign the effect to a physical button, which are described as inputs, where you pick the one that's hooked up to your controller. And that's basically it. The controller is now programmed in real time and can now do its pew-pew things. The last two tabs are the schedules and the options tab, where you can change your password and do all the other self-explanatory things that it describes. But the two most important ones are the backup and shutdown options. After all this work, you want to back it up just in case, which you do so by plugging in a USB memory stick directly into the controller and clicking this option, which means you can upload everything onto another controller via that USB backup, or re-upload it onto the current controller just in case you drastically mess things up. The shutdown option is important, as like a computer, you should never unplug it until it goes through a power down sequence, as you risk damaging the programming. It's recommended you wait 30 seconds after clicking this before unplugging. Hello? Andy? Yeah? Yeah? Oh, okay. No problem. I'll let them know. Alright, cheers. So that was Andy, and yes, during the making of this video, I sent a sneak peek video of what you just saw, which he approves, but he also mentioned there's even more things the controller can do, such as you can have a second line of LEDs on a separate data lead. This is from pin 40 on the controller, where you just have to enable it on a dashboard here. Then those LEDs are assigned from 1001 upwards. Now this is great if you don't want to chase a single long line of LEDs all the way around your model. You can also change the name of the Wi-Fi from the default inner light to whatever you want. This is really useful if you have multiple models using more of these devices. You can also tell the controller to join your Wi-Fi network instead of broadcasting its own, but this is only recommended once you have become familiar with the controller, as resetting it back, for example entering an incorrect password, is a bit of a pain.
What have I done?
The latest firmware,
software that provides basic machine instructions that allow the hardware to function,
now allows the controller to include a new bitmap image effect, where you upload the bitmap and it will scan through the image at a speed that you choose, applying the colours in the image to the LEDs. The new updated firmware also allows you to back up and restore the configuration without needing a USB drive like you see me do in this video, which means now you can just save it directly to your computer. Now let's carry on. Now that everything is programmed, it's time to give it a go. The coolest option by far with this system is the sci-fi meets reality L-card display, of which nowadays we call a tablet and device. The big difference is that this actually works and does everything physical buttons do. Now, I couldn't find any instructions for this option, so after another email conversation with Andy describing what I wanted, which was what I saw on the website, that he emailed me a QR code and instructions relevant to my device. This downloaded an app where you log in using the emailed instructions, and this loads up with your requested themed dashboard. This is also customizable on request, as it's all done by Andy, where for me, he even included my Captain's Dry Dock logo in the design. Then connect to the inner light Wi-Fi and then it all should work, remembering the controller is plugged in for power. The interface didn't work for me straight away, and so after another email conversation with Andy solved the issue, as it turns out that you have to make sure you use the correct naming convention and observe upper and lower case, so the controller and your device understand each other. In this case, startup, power down, torpedoes, and so on. So from what I gather, there's a load of different dashboard designs with functional buttons on the website, and I assume if your model isn't listed on there, a themed dashboard could be designed, but you need to clarify that with Andy before you order.
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
Now it's time for my review. If you're not a coder, Arduino or Raspberry Pi hobbyist, if you're like me and only have a basic knowledge of how to wire a house plug, but you want all the whistles and bells by making your model completely screen accurate with lighting and sound effects as if you were a coding ace, you cannot get better than something like this that's an off-the-shelf plug-and-play system that's completely customizable. Some may feel that the cost of the base unit is too high, but when you think about it, after the initial cost of the controller, everything else is so cheap and individual components can be sourced yourself elsewhere. The amount of support, as well as having the custom device dashboard made for my model without extra charge, is just crazy, but super welcome. And as a graphic designer by trade myself, I'm impressed with the designs and details produced, not only of the Enterprise D kit that I'm building, but also other model genres such as Star Wars and Back to the Future. The only downside in my experience actually isn't to do with the system, it's actually the lack of more advanced detailed instructions on the website. Now don't get me wrong, the direct communication and support was brilliant, with replies within 24 hours of messaging that explain things in detail, but I guess you got this video now. Other than that, the system itself is easy when you know how, from plugging it all together, customizing and adding additional components like an amp and speaker. The simplicity of the system juxtaposed with what it delivers is just amazing, and for the first time it allows anyone to achieve effects previously reserved for the really techie people. All in all, I highly recommend this system, and it's worth more than its current price tag, because when you think about it, the amount of time it would take you to make something like this from scratch, not to mention the dashboard, It's just awesome.
The best thing I've ever seen since long time.
Are you still here? Well, if you made it this long through the video,
Boring!
then I have your reward. While I was filming this, Andy informed me that yes, he has been offering the free app interface service with a purchase of the Pro Controller. However, he will be introducing a small charge, seeing that it's becoming really popular. But if you mention or add the code Captain's Dry Dock with your order of a Pro Controller, he will do this for free for you.
You lucky bastard.
Now all this is done, I'm going to start a brand new playlist building an accurate Enterprise D with this being installed inside. So if you want to watch that and you haven't subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button to get a notification when I start uploading those videos. In the meantime, my name's John Child, this is awesome, and hopefully I'll see you when I start building my Enterprise D here on Captain's Dry Dock. Live long and prosper.